there in the world, and then he lived in Wisconsin Rapids, and he's been a long member of the Forest History Association. We appreciate the time and effort you put into this presentation. And it's sort of a follow-up to what we did yesterday when we visited the dam, and you get to see the whole system and learn a little bit more about Billy Beaver.
Billy the Beaver, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to just thank everybody for helping me out with this. This topic grew out of a meeting I had with John Grossman and Jim Boker back in 2018, somewhere 2019. It was before COVID, and we were planning out the archives and that kind of thing. And that's where I first met Jim, and so then he texted me back after that, and he says, you know, what's going on up here in the North Fork of the Flambeau, Manitowish, the Bear River, Turtle River, all that, same thing's got to be going on down in the South Fork. And the one person who was kind of the impetus for this was the Divine, or the people who were the impetus were the Divine family of Lac du Flambeau, because we, on the South Fork, just north of Fifield, we have Divine Rapids. And the story is that Dan Devine, I think it was Dan, no.
It was Dan.
Dan Devine.
Dan Sr.
Yeah, and he wasn't the Packers coach, it was Dan Sr. And he and his family had picked bushels of cranberries, and he came down, he must have come down through to the, I'll show you the map later on, but he must have come down through the Pike Lake chain from Lac du Flambeau, and by the time he got to Fifield, he ran through what's now Divine Rapids, overturned the canoe and lost the berries, and that's how the rapids were
He
named.
hauled them from Manitowish water from portages.
There we go. Yeah. So anyway, Jim, and then this grew into what we informally call ourselves as the Upper Flambeau Watershed Research Group. Now that rolls off your tongue. And what it is an informal group composed of Jim and Kay from Manitowish Waters, and Jeff, and Therese Mitchell over at Lac du Flambeau, and Cindy Stiles, my wife, and who am I forgetting? Or no, sorry. It's the heat. It's the heat. You guys were in the wrong band yesterday, because I had Karen and Cindy and Sam with me, and it was a party band, and we didn't have a bit of alcohol. My wife Louise, who's not here. So we meet at least once a year, either at our cabin on Round Lake or Jim's place over in Manitowish here, or we'll find another place, and we just discuss the history of the two places. So that's where this all started from. The other thing, and I was going to start out with this, but I keep forgetting it. You know, usually when I talk to a group like this, I like to start out with a joke, because it'll loosen it up a little bit, you know. And I already did, but I told this to Louise. I said, I'm going to start out with a joke, and she said, don't do it. And I said, why not? And she said, because you are not funny. And, see, are we recording this? Okay, this I want this tape back. So anyway, but it's a lot of fun, and I'm having a lot of fun doing this kind of work, and I really enjoy it. So you're going to have to bear with me here, because technology is a tool, it's not my religion, and so we'll proceed on from there. So if you will take a look at that title, that's actually was said, but I couldn't decide if I should maybe put parentheses around this, or maybe a comma or something. But no, I thought I'd leave it so you could figure out, was he the best dam builder in the valley, or was he the best dam builder in the valley? You guys can figure that out as we go. So that's my little attempt at humor. And of course, Louise shook her head at that and said it won't fly. So you should have a handout, and on one side of the handout, you're going to have this map along with pictures of the dam, I believe. And so this is from George Forster's History of the Chippewa Valley. It dates from 1892, and it shows the watershed. Whoa, wrong button. See what I tell you. Okay, here we go. It shows the watershed from really Durand through Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls, up the main Chippewa to the forks of the Flambeau and the Chippewa. The Chippewa itself goes all the way up here by Coudray, and then further north to what's now Glidden, and further north to what's now Morse. And then the South Fork starts over here, and it heads I gotta see, I don't have my glasses on here. That's the Thornapple. Okay, here's the Flambeau. And then we have the forks of the Flambeau. And that goes to the South Fork over here to Pike Lake where I am here. And then the west, they call it the West Fork, we call it the North Fork, Park Falls, and then up over here. And we are somewhere over and up in here. And Val, the Ojibwe of Waswaganing are over in here. Right here's the reservation. So that places you. So what I want to, I think of my work with Jim as being like this. Jim, as you've just seen, is the lawyer. He takes all the disparate information, pulls it together, makes these connections, gives us this timeline. We could see this, and he does it in a compelling fashion. I am the paralegal. I can go and dig, I can find things, I can do things on a small scale, but it takes me a while to wrap things around my head. What's wrapping around my head right now is Therese Mitchell is trying to get me to understand that Amos, whose village was right, one of his settlements was right here at Pike Lake, that the Ojibwe were nomadic. They hunted, they fished, they moved. They weren't always in one place. So I'm trying to wrap my head around that, the importance of that. So likewise, Jim has helped me understand a lot of the connections here between these two forks of the channel, or of the river. Now, one thing I didn't figure out on my own is that there is an intrinsic connection between Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls and Phillips and Fifield because of the river. And those were the first European-American industrial access to the North Woods. It was up the river for logging. The other one, you'll see over here, is the Wisconsin Central, which was commissioned as a land-grant railroad in 1870 and built north to Ashland, connecting from the north and south at Glidden in 1877. That's the other, what I want to say, it's the other artery of European-American intrusion into the North Woods. So then that happened about 5 years after the first loggers in 1872 went up on the North Fork. So keep in mind that those are two intrinsic links that were arteries for the European Americans to go north. The Flambeau River watershed, which includes us over here, was considered the densest and richest stand of Pinus strobus in the state of Wisconsin. Pinus strobus is the white pine. And it was thick. It was, you go along the riverbanks, the lakes and that, there were profuse stands, and as John has pointed out, it wasn't all virgin, it wasn't all consistent, but it was more profuse than it was in other parts of the state. And so it was a highly prized target for the loggers. And of course it was valued for its ability to be shaped, cut, sanded, bent, whatever you want to do with it for building materials or other uses. And it was also fairly lightweight. It was easy to transport. And it would float, when you look at some of the pictures, and I don't have this as a slide, but when you look at some of the pictures of these white pines, it would float very easily. And so you could dam up these smaller creeks and streams and smaller rivers and float this stuff down to the mills at Chippewa Falls and Eau Claire. And keep also in mind that the time we're talking about is the 1870s and through the early 1880s. Well, up until 1882, there were no sawmills north of Chippewa Falls on the Flambeau. So everything had to go down there. The earliest one in Price County was here at Prentice, or excuse me, at Ogama in 1878, and that was B.M. Holmes, but he was associated with the railroad and not the river. They did float things in on the Spirit River here, or on the Jump River and so on, but they did not have a railroad access there. And then the second one was Phillips in 1883, and Fifield didn't have a sawmill until 1891. So everything that came off of the north and south forks of the Flambeau went down to Chippewa Falls or Eau Claire. If you look at your map again on this side with the, if we flip it over, one of the tributaries we're going to talk about is going to be the Elk River. And it has its headwaters over here in eastern Price County. and it flows down through Phillips, and then it goes through a chain of lakes here and ends up on the south fork of the Flambeau. So those two, I'll be kind of flipping back and forth here between these two maps. And this map that you're looking at now is from one of two copies of the 1883 map by Jacob Miller. We have one and Eau Claire has the other. They're 6 foot by 5 foot maps, and they show everything. They show all, well, whoops, come on, John, technology. They show, it starts here, the map, the Jacob Miller map, starts here, goes over to here, comes up to here, over to here, and over to here. And it's got dams, it's got camps, it's got towns, it's got railroads, everything. It's a beautiful, beautiful map. And that's where your big map picture is coming from. The first logging operations on the North Fork were in 1872 when Bill Seeberger and Ephraim Hackett went up the North Fork of the Flambeau, and they put up a camp just over the border here. And then they were later followed by a guy named, let's start over. The guy who was running the operations in the Chippewa Valley is this guy here, Frederick Weyerhaeuser. And we talked about his syndicate yesterday and the impact that he had. The other competitor he had is this guy, William T. Price. And Price was from Black River Falls. Weyerhaeuser was based in Eau Claire, Chippewa Falls. And so these two were main competitors. Price County is named after him. In the fall of 1875, a road was cut directly from Worcester, which is right here, directly across to the Flambeau, right here on this diagonal. And then up to Hackett's farm, and that fall W.T. Price located his first camp on the Elk River, and that was over here in this section, right up in here. He's locating his first camp, his first camp was in here, and then he had another camp up by Phillips. In the fall of 1879, the winter of 1880, A.B. McDonald, sorry about the vertigo you're going to get from going back and forth here, but A.B. McDonald built the second dam, or he built the first dam, which was the Lower Elk Dam, and then he built the second dam, which was Job's Dam. We'll come back and look at that again too. If you look, well, I'm going to take you on a little bit more of a tour here. So this is Worcester. This is the railroad point 1875. This is the furthest most point of the Wisconsin Central. And it was originally the dead end because the railroad had run into the Panic of 1873. It was mismanaged by Elijah Phillips, and it dead-ended here for about 3 years, and it was a dropping off point for the loggers. From that point, they would go north to the Pike Lake Chain, they would go west to the Flambeau. Prior to that, they would come up the Chippewa to the Flambeau, but now they had rail access and they cut that road and they could get over there. Now, in 1876, construction resumed, and all of this, or most of this, was abandoned, and some buildings moved to Phillips, and Phillips began as a settlement in 1876. So the question is, you know, with these operations, and I showed you, this is some pictures of Phillips in 1876, 1878, and 1883. And we'll come back. I'll be flipping back through these, and you guys will be totally dizzy by the time I'm done. Another logger who came up in the 1870s and 80s was Peter Musser from Muscatine, Iowa. And he went all the way up the Elk River, and your map I don't think shows this. It only stops at Phillips. Yeah, it only goes as far as Phillips. But if you follow the river northeast out of Phillips, he went all the way up here and he built a dam in 1880. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work you back from the latest dam to the original dam. And the reason I'm doing that is because the pictures you're going to see illustrate this dam in operation around 1900 or 1890, but it gives you a good idea of how the dams operated. So the loggers would go and you had to have authorization from the state to build a dam on a body of water, because the waters of Wisconsin belong to the citizens of Wisconsin according to the state constitution. Well, Price was not going to be bothered by these formalities. So he built the first dam in Price County up on the Round Lake in 1876. And from there, others followed, McDonald and so on. So Musser built his dam in 1880 with authorization, and it was located right up at the headwaters. If I get my technology right, I'll be good. Right up here. Luntz Dam is what it's called. And these scenes are from about 1890 to 1900 of the log drive on the Upper Elk River, Big Elk River. And you can see here the booming works that we talked about yesterday when we were at the Rest Lake Dam. Here's a platform boom. Here's the wheels for cranking the gates up and down. And back here is the impoundment of the Elk River. And what these guys, these are your river pigs here that Jim was talking about. And what they're doing is they're using these long pipe poles to organize these logs in an orderly fashion so you can get them cross-hooked in the gates, and then they sluice them through the gates down into the river. And here's another shot of a boom. This is a little bit more of a permanent boom. You can see some of the grass growing in there, but it's still floating on the river. So what they do is they shove those through, they get them organized like you just saw, and then they start sluicing them through, and you have two main gates that are used for the drive, and one uses a water gate. Or you can use one as a main drive and two as water gates. You can alternate them. And the idea here is that you've got to regulate the pressure on the back side of the dam so that you can both get the logs through without jamming in these gates, as well as not holding so much water or losing so much water that you lose your drive. So it's quite an art. And it included a whole crew of people to work with. So once they got these, they figured out, okay, this is our driving gate right here. These are our two water gates. We're going to regulate the water here. We're going to drive down this one. And then as I showed you in that one photograph I had, same photograph, everything comes down, and if your current isn't, if your current isn't kind of keeping going here, you're going to get them eddying around, and they're going to start washing out some of these embankments here. And you can see how they've had to build up the embankment of the dam and to create that impoundment. These are white pine, Pinus strobus. Hemlock would not float well enough in these small streams. And the reason that the hemlocks over at Doring's Tract on the Pike Lake chain are still there after 340 or 370 years now is because no logging railroad ever reached that tract of land, nor did any Caterpillar truck logger reach that tract of land. Doring had acquired it and protected it. The only way you can get hemlock out of these woods is by rail or by truck. It will not float on these small rivers. And what red pine would float, but not quite as nice as Pinus strobus. And some of the others, like cedar, would float too, but it was a lot more work. Ultimately, many of those logs were left, or those trees were left for the railroad era. So that, everybody, is what you're talking about with the dams. And as you look at the dams, and I talk about how they're built, you're going to see a consistency in construction here. Now, Billy the Beaver did not build this dam. Lunt, A.D. Lunt, who was a land officer for Wisconsin Central, Peter Musser had their crews build this dam. So what we're going to do is we're going to start here, and this is the third dam up here on Luntz Dam. Now we're going to move towards Phillips, and our story is going to start focusing right here west of Phillips. So you'll see here McDonald's Dam is right here, and as you go a little bit more further, as you go a little bit more further west, come on John, you can do this, there we go. You're going to see the Lower Elk Dam, and that's the one that describes most of Billy the Beaver's work. So we're going to kind of leave that right there. Okay, so Billy the Beaver, William H. England, born in Quebec, immigrates to Eau Claire sometime in the early 1870s or late 1860s with his family. Has a brother, John. I don't know if he's older or younger yet. I haven't done a lot of work. This is a work in progress. But John and Billy start going to work in the lumber camps, and they start working for Kennedy and all these guys, Weyerhaeuser, everybody in Eau Claire. And they both develop reputations as proficient loggers. They're able to run a good crew. They know what they're doing. Billy, William H., was married, had a wife, Grace, had 3 daughters, and he, in particular, is the focus of our story, but his brother is the first one to enter the historic record up by us. And he does so in 1879. He said, Johnny England, one of the whitest boys and best loggers in northern Wisconsin, was in this village on Wednesday. Johnny is running a camp for Mosher and Law this winter and is doing excellent work. Now, Mosher and Law's camp, I won't keep flipping the slides back, but Mosher and Law, you'll see down over here, there's a Mosher camp right in here, and then there's another Mosher camp that's off your map there. Mosher was a logger from La Crosse, and he set up several camps up there too. A lot of loggers competing up here. William's earliest entrance into the published record of the Flambeau River watershed is in the Phillips Badger on July 6, 1881, 3 years after his brother was mentioned. And it reads, A.B. McDonald and William H. England of Eau Claire with a force of 22 men arrived in Phillips Wednesday eve, bound for the dam at the foot of Long Lake. They will make Phillips the headquarters for about 2 months while they give that dam a thorough overhauling. So, let's go back on our slides again, and we're going to take a look at this man. Is Alexander McDonald of Chippewa Falls. You may have heard of Chippewa Falls McDonald High School, and he was prominent in the community and also the Catholic Church. There's a quite ornate Catholic church up on the hill behind Liney's, and there's a school that goes with it. He built all that, and then Chippewa Falls McDonald High School was his. So he was a dam supervisor for Weyerhaeuser's outfit, and he early on hooks up with the England boys and is doing logging. And I don't know this for a fact, but I'm assuming that William started working with McDonald on these dams. That's where he got his start. It was in the Flambeau River Valley. So, and John did not. His brother John stayed in logging and built his name as a logger. The other guy I'm going to give you a picture of right away is this fella here. He comes into the story a little bit later. This is Charles Harmon Henry, Civil War veteran, was involved in logging with Kennedy out of Eau Claire, and then later on worked for Weyerhaeuser himself. And he was operating throughout the Chippewa Valley and the Flambeau River Valley. And he's the one who put down the recollections of Beaver. That's how we know about him. So Henry and McDonald are the 2 operators that Billy ended up working with. First McDonald, secondly with Henry, and all tied in with Weyerhaeuser. Now, let's go back. This is not a slide program. I'm sorry to put you through this. Now I want to start working on the map and going down the river. So the technique of building these dams was fairly well known, and John Vogel wrote a detailed report in the Wisconsin Magazine of History in 1983 that put the map, or put the Round Lake Logging Dam on the map. And it was in his article that I first came across Billy the Beaver. And the story goes like this. Okay. I'm sorry here. Okay. This happened in 1884. The Biles brothers out of Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls had built the Lake Holcomb Dam, which holds back the lake that we have now. Not the original dam holds it back, but the first dam. And it kept washing out. And Weyerhaeuser was frustrated because it was interfering with his drives. That dam is, what, 1,000 feet long or 800 feet long? And they just couldn't hold it together. So, after having been in operation for only 2 years, the wings of the Little Falls Dam, that's at Holcomb, were washed out in the floods of 1880. It was rebuilt by Swift and Biles, only to be washed out again in 1884. This time, Billy the Beaver England, a well-known folk technologist who specialized in logging dams, was secured to rebuild the dam. At the time, Captain Charles H. Henry was the supervisor of all upriver logging and driving operations for the Weyerhaeuser pool. He also oversaw dam construction and rebuilding, and it was he who recommended England for the 1884 Little Falls rebuilding job. As Henry later related the incident, Soon after the dam went out this time, Mr. Weyerhaeuser called me to his office in Chippewa Falls and asked, who is the best dam builder on the Chippewa? We don't know what emphasis Weyerhaeuser used on it. The answer was Billy England, the Beaver, who had never lost a dam. We, Mr. Weyerhaeuser, Mr. England, and myself drove to Little Falls, measured, made soundings, and agreed that the wings should be built as they were, and now, 51 years later, 51 years after 1884, the wings of the Holcomb Dam stand practically as Mr. England left them in the spring of 1885, having worked a large crew of men during the fall and a very cold winter. So, England built his name in the Flambeau River Valley, and we know this because the 1881, August 17, 1881 article in the Phillips Badger gives a detailed account of his work on the Lower Elk Dam. So the Lower Elk Dam is right here. This is the first dam that was built on the Elk River by McDonald in 1878. And now it needed to be rebuilt. And these original dams were nothing to brag or write home about. They were basically put up just to do the log driving. So this article that I'm going to read to you is about this dam. The Badger correspondent walked out from Phillips to the dam in August of 1881, and he describes in a long article, and I'm just going to read the highlights of it, on the lower dam, what is being done to it and what the job looks like. Some 6 weeks ago, A.B. McDonald and Mr. William H. England, with a crew of 20 men, came up to Phillips, went down the Elk River to repair dams of the Mississippi River Logging Company. The camp consists of a log cook shanty, 20 by 30, 7 feet high, with plate logs inside, roofed with shakes, a sleeping shanty about 8 by 10, 2 field tents, a couple of majiggers, by any other name was handy, for which seemed only big enough to cover 2 men each. The cook, Mr. Martin Stapleton, set out a supper and we feasted. There was all kinds of luxuries, well fixed up, showing that the gentleman was a skilled hand. The boys bragged on their good living, and all the time we were there, and they had good reason. Now here's a description of the original dam that McDonald built in 1878. The old dam was 8 feet in height at the gates. The work now being done raises it 4 feet more and extends the wings of courses much further on each side. The old dam is made of piles slanting 20 feet in length, with their upper ends pointing downstream, buried for the most part under a heavy bed of gravel. So what they did is they built up a wall of logs, and then they would take big planking and shove it down into the river on the upside of the dam, and then they built a crude gate there, and that's what they were running those logs through. And after, this was 1881, so after 4 years of that, it was getting pretty beat up. The new work on the top of it consists of a system of cob work with 2 streak sills running lengthwise about 7 feet apart, and short cross pieces pinned to them in 1-inch elm pins. Then 2 more streak sills on top, so they're building a decking across that. They're rebuilding that cribbing and building a decking on that. The front streak sill is 15 inches in diameter round. The rear one, in the body of the dam structure, is hewn flat and measures 14 inches thick from 18 to 20 inches wide, the logs ranging from 16 to 30 feet in length. Now, if you'll take a look at this drawing of the Round Lake logging dam that I've got there, you can kind of follow with how they're putting that together. And so all the work that's being done that I just read to you is on the upper side of the dam where the gate, where the wheels are for opening the gates. All this is filled in with gravel, level with the top of the timbers, running back upstream until the top of the dam is 20 feet wide and the bottom nearly 30. The dam beginning at the next road starts towards the north. The next row starts towards the north, but with a sweep towards the northeast. The south wing is 320 feet in length to the gates. The north wing 300 feet. Now I'm going to show you a picture of this dam, and there's what's being described. So these are the wings that are coming out. And then this one curves around a little bit. This is the dam that Billy the Beaver rebuilt in 1881. So he had to take all this apart, rebuild it. Well, he didn't take it all apart, but he rebuilt all this structure in here. And this is the decking going across and so on. But it is at the gates, right back here, where the main work is being done after all. The old structure consisted of 2 piers 7 feet wide with a 12-foot long sluice between them and an 8-foot wide gate on either side. 3 gates in all, with a clear opening of 28 feet. The gates themselves were squared timbers dropped one by one, the ends sliding in a slot on perpendicular gate timber. The new gates are much more elaborate, and we shall attempt a description of them. First then, there is laid at the bottom of the stream a streak sill. Now that's just laying the foundation of the dam that the base, the sluice base is going to be on. A streak sill of 14 by 18 inches and 34 feet long, parallel with the current. Mortised into this beginning at the upper end are 3 upright posts, 10 inches square. Then the gate posts of 18 by 22 inches, faced with a strip of 1-inch iron, 4 inches wide, for the gate wheels to track on. And then another upright post. The uprights are 16 feet high. The gate post 22. Below the gate post are 2 diagonal braces, 10 by 12 inches, to help withstand pressure of the water. The whole framework is framed into heavy sills on the top, sheeted up with 4-inch plank. So this is the 4-inch, there's a couple layers of 4-inch plank up there. And then what you can't see here is all that construction for the gates. For 3 feet above the street sill, it is filled in with gravel. Then a flooring, then a flooring goes on of 8-inch timbers pinned down to cross the beams to the end of the guide piers, 32 feet in all. Over this, the water flows. So this decking here is all built out of plank. Now, on the Round Lake logging dam, if you guys go over there, the way they got this on the National Register is that they were able to salvage the original 1876 plank floor of the Round Lake Dam and reconstruct the superstructure that you see in this drawing over that original plank floor according to the 1878 specifications as authorized by the state. Yeah, the new gates, made of 6-inch plank in the log sluice, 4-inch planks in the other openings, firmly framed, bolted together, will rest on friction wheels against the iron facing of massive gate posts. A windlass arrangement. Right up here, well, okay, we gotta go back here. Here's another shot of it. This is the same dam from another angle. But right here are the windlasses. Those are the cogged wheels that are used to raise and lower the gates. So here you got a little bit better picture of how that was constructed. It will be adjusted so that one man can raise each gate, drawing it up by a chain, and another chain be attached so that by the gate it can be drawn down. 2 additional gates, 7 feet wide, are being put in, making 5 in all. Now this is when he enlarged it to a 5-foot dam. On the south bank is a similar wing. On top of these will be the same height as the guide piers, 6 feet below the crest of the dam. The north guide wing must be built 14 feet of water. The cost of the work is $3,000. To realize the work it is necessary to understand that Mr. England, the builder, has no pile drivers, no coffer dams, no dump carts or sawed timbers at his command. The axe and the wheelbarrow are his only resources. Trees are felled in the woods, surrounded, squared, or hewn into plank, and drawn into place with a yoke of cattle. The gravel, thousands of cubic yards, is carted in on wheelbarrows.
That would have been the same for the Round Lake Dam too?
Yeah, pretty much. Yep. Everything was built with found materials on site. What determined the dam sites for these types of driving dams was the size of the channel of the river and the lakes that you were flowing into. So as you look at your map, this is the Lower Elk Dam right here. And so it's right here. So this channel, you know, this was a good channel to put that dam in because then you could back this water up. The problem was that you were getting so much logging going on that you actually had, you know, now you got logs coming from here down too, and you've got logs coming from here. Remember, Musser's Dam isn't in just yet, but you got logs. They had a dam down here, Morrill's Dam, and so this was all being flooded and you needed more. That's why they put in the second dam, which is oops, getting ahead of myself here. There, which is this dam right here, Job's Dam. That's the second one. First one's over here, second one's here, Musser's up here. So, our thanks are tendered to Mr. England for the gentlemanly courtesy and patience with which he showed us around and answered the 10,000 questions that a greenhorn needs to ask in order to find out what he wanted to know. So this dam did not get completed quite yet. It wasn't done until October 26th of 1881, when they had the camp boat Wanigan was towed up from the lower dam on Saturday and beached at Phillips. Woods living had so toughened the sinews of the men that Phillips could not furnish ropes or chains to hold them when they tried to drag Noah Briggs' ark ashore. This means that the work on the dam has formally been suspended for the winter. The gates and the new apron yet lacking will be put in before the drive commences in the spring, probably a week's drive, or job. So basically during the winter they got that done. Now the next dam was built in 1879 and it is this one, McDonald's Dam right here. And so those two dams were used to regulate the water of the Elk River, the Bigger Elk River, from Lake Droy and Elk Lake down through to the Flambeau River. Now if I go back, if I got this right, that's Musser's Dam, get an idea of that. This is the second dam. This is McDonald's second dam, Job's Dam. And you can see the kind of consistency in construction here. And this gives you a little bit better idea of the wings that he was building. And you can see these long chutes in here. This one's a little bit different configuration than the first dam, but it's the same idea. And up here are the windlasses, and you can see the heavy planking going across. And all this in here is filled with gravel. All this is filled with, you can see all the rubble and rocks and everything in here. And this one too, you can see better here, the embankment that was built up and all the rocks and everything. And then they line these things with logs too to keep them moving so they wouldn't run into the muck of the banks. This is the Lower Elk Dam, built in 1877. This is what it looks like today. Now, I threw in this one. This is the Rest Lake Dam. This is where we were yesterday. And we were standing over, Jim, we were standing over, we were standing over here, right? Correct?
Yes.
And all those pilings that you saw sticking up are over here. So this gives you an excellent idea. And Billy the Beaver built this dam in 1887. So everything that he learned...
I think that's the 1900 dam. And after looking at your presentation, I know Billy the Beaver built that one, and maybe he built the first one, but he definitely built that one because it's identical to the technology you've shown us.
Yep. Then you can see these long stringers out here. That gets the water.
That's the 1900 dam.
Yeah. And that keeps it flowing. That keeps them from eddying back into these ponds here. So the dam that was at Rest Lake is essentially the same dam as on the Elk River and also further up. Okay, we're going to just let that sit. I want you to just think about that. Let me read you some more information here. So in 1916, Cap Henry writes his recollections for the Eau Claire Leader. Interesting narrative of the past dating back 50 years or more, reminiscence leading up to the present time as told by Cap Henry. He writes, I will finish this lengthy story by telling something of the logging, log driving and improvements on the Chippewa and tributaries, beginning with the logging season of 1879 and 80 when my work began with Messrs. Ingram, Kennedy and Company, looking after the logging interests of the season. Describing the rapids and some of the dams on the Chippewa and Flambeau Rivers, Henry wrote, The next above Park Falls. So if we go back here on your map and you take a look at Park Falls, find Park Falls on your map, and you can kind of follow along as I read these off. The next above Park Falls are the Cedar Rapids and Windfall Rapids. The next, the Bear Skull Rapids, which are just below the mouth of the Turtle River. There are no rapids on the North Fork between the Turtle and Bear Creek, and none on the Bear Creek or River, which is an Indian reservation stream, the Lac de Flambeau Reserve. From the mouth of the Bear River to the source, the North Fork is known as the Manitouish River. There are no rapids on that river until we arrive near the Manitouish Dam. These rapids were not named. The Manitouish Dam was one of Billy England's construction, and one that depended upon for log driving. The dam was built for a 26-foot head, and the resorters above the dam went to law and compelled lowering the head to 8 feet. I secured that and the Bear River. I secured the charters. This is Henry talking about himself. I secured the charters for the construction of the Bear River Dam at the Lac de Flambeau Indian Village, and the Old Village, and the Manitouish Dam from the state legislature when Billy Rust, that's William Rust, was of our city, was in the state senate. In 1885, Henry had been hired in this capacity by Frederick Weyerhaeuser, and he recalled, "Mr. England built many of our dams, flooding dams during those years that we were handling large log drives, such as the Manitouish Dam, Bear River, the Lac de Flambeau Indian Village, the Squaw Lake," excuse me, that's the print, that's the way it's printed, it's now Amber Lake, the Sugar Bush on the South Fork of the Flambeau, 2 large dams on the West Fork of the Chippewa, and many others. He remodeled and strengthened many of the old dams that were built by other men. So, on and on. The Phillips Badger in the 1880s published in 1881 complete lists of all the loggers on the Upper Flambeau and the Upper Chippewa, and named who were the bosses, how many men, how many feet were to be cut, and the sections, ranges, and town locations. And when you take that information from that 1881, 1882 picture or papers and match it with our Jacob Miller map, you start getting a real good picture of all these different loggers on the operations up there. So what happened to William H. England? Well, on June 8th, 1895, occurred this article in the Eau Claire Weekly Leader. The end of his sufferings came shortly after 8 o'clock last evening. A resident of Eau Claire for 22 years was well and favorably known. About 8:15 last night, the death of William England occurred at his home, 320 2nd Avenue, about his bedside being gathered members of his family. Mr. England's illness has extended over several weeks, and for some days hope of his recovery was abandoned by the physicians. The seriousness of his case was apparent when he was taken ill at Hayward. He was brought to his home here and for a time improved, only to have a relapse. He has suffered from congestion of the brain, followed by partial paralysis. The end came very peacefully. Mr. England was 51 years of age, leaving a highly esteemed family, his wife and 3 daughters, his wife Gracie, and 3 daughters, Lizzie, Lottie, and Jessie. His brother John resides in this city, a sister in Minnesota, his mother, brother, and 2 sisters in Snohomish, Washington. He came to Eau Claire 22 years ago, his boyhood being in Quebec, Canada. For many years, he has been a prominent logger. For some years prior to 1889, he was a partner with George W. Thomas in the firm of England and Thomas, logging near Hayward in Sawyer County. For 3 years past, he has been associated with Daniel McGillis in logging operations. He was a man of kindly nature, leaves a large list of acquaintances and warm personal friends. To the bereaved family, the sympathy of all is extended. And finally, then a week later, on June 15th, the funeral of Mr. England on Sunday. R.C. Chapel was the priest. On Sunday, a great number of friends gathered at the home of the late William England. Funeral services were conducted, by Reverend A.C. Kempton of the First Baptist Church, the casket covered with beautiful floral emblems, and following the prayer and words of comfort to the bereaved relatives by the pastor, the funeral was in charge of the local Masonic Lodge. The pallbearers were from Lodge number 112. Services at the grave in Lakeview Cemetery were necessarily shortened on account of rain. Worshipful Master George B. Wheeler conducted the services. Thus endeth the life of William H. England. So, me being a map guy and visual, I want a picture of Billy the Beaver. And so I've been working with the Eau Claire Chippewa Valley Museum. I'm a member of that historical society, and I went over to the archives at Eau Claire. And Jody Kipfmeyer, who was the archivist there, went through her files, and she found this. And it's labeled Mr. England, either William or John. And oh, to be so close, and yet so far. Now, I want to believe that this picture is Billy the Beaver England, and I'm going to tell you why. I should say I want to believe, and I postulate. And this is where Jim is so much better than I, because he can take all these and he can ask good pertinent questions where I get into something and I want it to be. And it might not be. So Jim and Karen and Cindy and Therese, once they're done slapping me upside the head and saying, hey Bird, no, maybe it's not going to do that. Well, my theory is that in spite of the gaps in information in this story, and it's not complete because there's still research going on, Brother John England shows up in the newspapers on occasion and in some of the contracts and other document. But the thing that I found most striking is the frequency in which Billy is referenced. He worked for McDonald, Henry, who were Weyerhaeuser's superintendents in the upper Chippewa Valley watershed. Both men were very concerned about the dams and their construction. However, Henry, a Civil War veteran and grizzled backwoods veteran, responded quickly when William Bartlett asked him to answer his inquiries about the logging saga of the Chippewa Valley. Henry's recollections regarding William's skills imply a relationship that a lasting memory, aided by a visual image of the man, might be a keepsake Henry would seek and keep. The Eau Claire City directories from 1880 to 95 under loggers list both brothers, their associates, but they do not list the brothers in association with each other. More work needs to be done with these documents. But again, with Billy's reputation as a craftsman who was highly regarded and sought by these major operators to build and rebuild dams, and who spent time and effort running logging crews, just leads me to believe that this may well be Billy the Beaver England. And this was in the Charles H., the C.H. Henry papers, or was part of it. And there's extensive correspondence between Henry and William Bartlett, who was a local businessman who was collecting all this history back around the World War I era through the 1930s. And I haven't read all that yet. And I'm hoping I'm going to find a letter in there that says, and enclosing all this data and information along with some pictures, among which is the picture of Billy the Beaver England. That's what I'm hoping for. Now, if it's not going to be like that, well, I've already published disclaimers to the effect. And if it's not, well, then it's John, probably. Yes?
So this came out of Cap Henry's,
This came out of Cap Henry's papers.
right. And Cap Henry was in charge of the Chippewa River Improvement and Log Driving Company, the ace leader of all log building for the Weyerhaeuser syndicate. Of course, it's Billy the Beaver, not his random logging brother in some cedar swamp.
If you ever need a recommendation, you come to see me.
I'm just saying, I'm looking at my slides, which I got from you, and I'm looking at that guy's mug, and yeah, the dots are closest here.
Well, I just hope that we're both correct. Kate?
Well, I found an article about C.H. Henry spending a summer at the Wrestling Dam and running a tourist camp. Fishermen would come and stay there, and it tells stories about him taking people out to places that have never been fished before.
Send me that, would you please?
Yeah, but I don't know why somebody that important in the syndicate would, unless he wanted to be there for the summer.
Well, these guys were involved in a lot more than logging. I mean, think of this. Billy the Beaver was not only building dams and had this reputation as a dam builder, but he also concurrently ran logging camps in the Elk River and on the Flambeau. And then he ended his life ended at a time when he was still logging up around Hayward and that. So he was doing both. They were all over the place.
Well, they talked about it being a really busy place, and the fishermen and tourists that would come up would stay in the
What year was it?
logging camp. I don't remember the exact year. They'd stay in the logging camps and have fresh balsam on their beds, and there was a cook there for the summer. Talks about one time going out to Round Lake, and I don't know if it's the Round Lake, you know, here by Boulder. But they fished it with no bait, just bare hooks, and they caught as many fish as they wanted to pull out.
Yeah. The fishing below these dams was great.
That's true. Look at the age of England in that picture. If he died at 51, that picture would have been more contemporaneous with his dam building as a younger man than his later life.
Yeah, I figure he's got to be in his 20s or maybe early 30s. There.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of these things, you know, it's like finding those first pictures of Lake Shore and Eastern when I was 18 years old at Johnson's Hardware. I'm just like, but I can count on one finger the number of pictures, thousands of pictures I've handled in 53 years that have documentation on the back. And this one fortunately had that much on it. Now we just got to parse it out. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of the builder of the Rest Lake. Well, no, it's not the story. It's the research that I've uncovered so far on the builder of the Rest Lake Dam. And when you look at the Rest Lake Dam, well, I don't know if you want to look at that face or not, but think about it. Any other questions or anything?
This is not related, but what was the Wilson Dam? Probably in the Phillips area.
The Wilson Dam was further up on the, it's further up on the Elk. They've had authorization for that. I'm building an encyclopedia of newspaper articles from 6 different newspapers dating from 1870 to 1890. And they document railroad building and logging in the upper Flambeau Valley. And I've also included all the state authorizations for all the dams on the Flambeau system. And the Wilson Dam is authorized, I think, in 1890 something, and that's the one way up the Wilson flowage, not the Wilson flowage by Phillips, but way up the Elk River. And that was called Wilson's Dam.
Between Phillips and Musser.
Yes.
I've got a picture of it here.
And there's another one who hasn't shared with me, that she knows. Well, I need to get that too. Yes.
Was Musser involved in any of the cranberry bog farming that goes on around Worcester, Watershed?
No, that was well, I don't know who started the cranberry company in Cranberry Lake, south of Phillips, but I do know that the Gottschalks from Port Edwards bought that marsh way back early, like I want to say like 60, 70 years ago, and they've run it since. I don't know who built that. There are pictures in the Lac de Flambeau archives about...
Gillespie was in there before that, but I think somebody else was in there before Gillespie, because it was big already in the 1950s.
Yeah, right. Before I forget, you can keep these. Those are handouts. I always like to have handouts and that. Yeah, so to answer your question, Matt, I don't think Musser was involved in that at all, because that didn't start. There's pictures in the archives at Lac de Flambeau, and we have a couple pictures of the marshes being built, because they wanted to build some cranberry marshes over in Lac de Flambeau, and they went over there and took some pictures in the 1920s of building those beds. So.
Thank you.
You're welcome.